Regulatory red tape is preventing independent power producers from feeding electricity into the national grid. And now the finance minister will be stepping in. Eskom this week announced South Africa needs between 4,000 and 6,000 megawatts of electricity from the private sector to stop blackouts. Speaking at the release of the Operation Vulindlela report, Enoch Godongwana noted concerns over NERSA's registration requirements. Govan Whittles was at that briefing. He joins us now live. So Operation Vulindlela is supposed to actually help us see economic recovery in this country, Govan. Have we seen any improvements through this method or system?
Well, we have, Shahan. So far, they have recorded significant successes, among them raising 8 billion rand for the fiscus through the auctioning off of the spectrum, or the initial one. And they say that they project 54 billion rand in investment from the industry once the rest of the process gets underway. But there are also other successes, such as the launch of the national rail policy, because, of course, one of the strategic objectives in terms of the structural reforms that this Operation Vulindlela set out to implement was the development of a rail policy that would facilitate the private sector having access to those Transnet lines. We saw exactly that in the policy. It actually instructs Transnet to set up a traffic management function, which would facilitate control of the network and provide access to private players. So that's also a win for Operation Vulindlela. But let's just put it into perspective. Operation Vulindlela was launched in 2020. It's a strategic partnership between the presidency and the National Treasury. And they've set out 5 objectives or areas where they want to implement structural reforms. And the reforms include Eskom, trying to address that electricity shortage of the 6,000 megawatts and by facilitating power generation by private players through the IPP program. But of course, there are some concerns around how people can get registered once they are able to produce that electricity to get it onto the grid. But there are also other areas. I mentioned the spectrum, and then there's, of course, restructuring the visa regime to improve tourism in the country. And then they've implemented better monitoring systems for water management in the country. Those are the main objectives, but there is some feedback from the industry and business as they start implementing this. And today's launch of the Operation Vulindlela report set out not only to specify the victories they've achieved, but also respond to some of those concerns. Let's take a look at a report that I've prepared, highlighting some of the comments from the Minister in the Presidency and the Minister of Finance.
Self-generation limits have been raised to 100 megawatts, but this isn't feeding into the grid because of red tape.
Over the coming months, we'll redouble our efforts to resolve the energy crisis and ensure that the reforms facing implementation challenges access the support they need to progress.
The finance minister says the partnership between the presidency and the treasury has already recorded some success.
In digital communication, the successful allocation of high-demand spectrum not only raised more than 8 billion rand for the fiscus, recent estimates suggest that the industry will invest over 50 billion.
And the minister in the presidency has responded to criticism of Operation Vulindlela's reach.
Departments and entities themselves remain responsible for the implementation of the reforms. Operation Vulindlela does not replace their role, but rather provides active support for implementation, especially where capacity is lacking.
Vulindlela's report has been welcomed by Business Unity South Africa, but questions remain about whether this intervention can save Eskom and stop load shedding. Govan Whittles, Johannesburg.